I've been a member of the City Club since 1985, and about 10 years into it or so, Tom had asked me if he was going to move on from Quaker, and he said that he asked me if I would take over as president of the City Club, and I said yes, I would. I'd be very honored, with one condition, that he remain as chairman. He served for 17 years as president of the City Club of Chicago, did a phenomenal job. He's now in about his fifth or sixth year of the 17-year agreement. There's several options to come. The chairman of the City Club of Chicago, Tom Roeser. Thomas?
Thank you very much. I'm also a notary public. He forgot to say that. If you're like me, you've been disillusioned frequently with charges against the clergy, and for a Catholic, at least, it's pretty tough going once in a while. But certainly has been edifying to me to know Monsignor Mcdermott and to spend the years that I spent writing this book. It took 4 years to write the book, and every time I was ready to give it to the publisher, he'd tell me another story. Just about ready to go, and he'd tell me another story. So I have to call it back and add to it. And sure as there is a God in heaven, last week, after the book came out and everything else, and we're sitting around, Father tells us about the story of Harry Houdini. I missed it entirely. Harry Houdini went to Mundelein, not as a priesthood student, but as a guest of George Cardinal Mundelein, did tricks for the kids and everything else. It could have been in the book, but it's not in the book, but it'll be in the second book when it comes out, because there's so much left, I think. He is truly an unusual man. A man who started on the south side of Chicago at as Theodore Roosevelt shortly before that left office in 1909. Moved from there to a point where he was a sports fan. Matter of fact, he could have been a sports writer. He speaks in the jargon of a sports writer. And he went from there to the priesthood, to an assistant pastorate at Our Lady of Peace, from there to Catholic Charities, where he served under Len O'Connor's brother, who became the Bishop of Springfield. And when he was a priest at Catholic Charities, he developed a nightly ministry, going out to Skid Row to find people who really were not only down and out, but forsaken by all of the people in the world, alone, drunk, and he would pick them up and give them some kind of hope. He was the first to bring AA. AA started as sort of an upper middle class thing. After all, the founders of AA were a stockbroker and a doctor. But he brought AA to Skid Row. And to tell you some of the things that he put up with in this book, a man named Luther Phillips, who was his first employee, tells about a man named Billy Kahn that they brought in together. This guy had been on the street for maybe 10 years, Phillips says. He never had a change of shorts. His beard was down to here. It stands out in my life more than all the others because he was the greatest challenge we had. There was a lot before, but he was the greatest. This man's hair was as long as my arm. It dropped down almost to his knees. His beard was just that long. His hair was that long, and it was filled with everything you could name. He had a cast they had put on his arm, on his elbow, and it had never been taken off. It was part of his bones. His pants were stuck on him, along with his shirt. There wasn't anything under there. We took him in. They brought him in the wagon to put him downstairs in the basement of that building, This was an early Haymarket. We had to shower him. And I'll tell you, I couldn't stand much of the smell. I couldn't stay there with him. I couldn't stand the smell. He didn't want to touch the water. We finally got the scrub brushes and scrubbed them and got him out of there. Then we took some shears and cut his hair, cut it off with the clippers and cut his beard. He was fighting us all the way, but we wrestled with him. We got him shaved down, cut down, washed down, and Father took his clothes off. His cast, maggots were coming out of it. We sprayed it and tried to kill the lice as best we could. We gave him some clean shorts, T-shirts, and clean clothes. It was the most surprising thing I ever saw in my life and made me feel happier than anything else in the world, that he liked what he saw. He didn't look the same. We didn't take a picture of him, but I wish we had. He turned around. He went upstairs. He stayed with us 5 days, and every day he got up, he wanted to go down and shower. We entered him back into society, but we couldn't get him straightened out. He's just one of those guys who stands out in my life. To see them come in, some made it, I knew them all. But Father was there with all of us. Luther Phillips. I think for that alone, he deserves a round of applause. The story of Father Mac is the story of a man who not only did this for his entire priestly life, but who at the age of 75 took a loan of something like $1.7 million on his own to co-found what is really known as Cook County's largest alcohol and drug treatment center, and which today is the finest center in the world, better than Betty Ford, because Betty Ford, as good as it is, serving millionaires, doesn't have Father Mac, and Haymarket has Father Mac. The poor here have a center that overshadows Betty Ford, and it is because of him that this exists. You know, the book tells the story of his life, but even more than that, tells the story of Chicago and how it grew from 1909, how the nation changed, how the church grew, and is really people with enough characters to make the shade of Damon Runyon twitch. There is John Ireland Gallery, Father John Ireland Gallery, who when Cardinal Stritch came to his parish for confirmation said, "It's a cold day out, Bishop. Do you care for a mouthful of bourbon?" There was Big Bill Thompson, who was sitting in the lobby of the Congress Hotel when Father approached him, and Father said that, you know, when he was a young man going to Quigley, Big Bill was riding in his open car by, and he always said, "There goes the mayor of Chicago," to which Big Bill said, "I did a hell of a lot of work before you saw me, Father." Dean O'Banion, who was buried with full churchly honors by a man by the name of Father Patrick Malloy against the wishes of Cardinal Mundelein. Cardinal Mundelein banished him to Panama after that and forgot about him. And some years later, Cardinal Mundelein's sister came from a tour of Panama and came to see the Cardinal and said, "You know, I met the finest Irish priest that I've ever met, somebody who thinks the world of you." And he said, "Really? Who is it?" She said, "Father Malloy." "Malloy!" I just remembered where he was. Brought him back. Malloy was a person I would have loved to have met. I won't say he was a chaplain to the outfit. They always tried to investigate to see if he had any ties. He didn't have ties, but he had great influence. Somebody came in and said, "They stole my car." Malloy said, "What kind of a car was it?" "Oh, it was a Packard," and it was what year? It was Packard, and it was about 1934, so what color? He goes to the phone, and about a half hour later, the car comes back to the priest from whom it was stolen, and it was waxed and washed back, courtesy of the monk. That was Father Malloy, who would, every time he saw Father Mcdermott, would say, "Hey, punk." That was Father Malloy. And he was an interesting guy. There are the story of the Racine Cardinals, the Cardinals football team, as Steve Neal knows, really started in Chicago. Racine Cardinals is where they started. A ghost football is what they called it. Because, in fact, after those lads were working during the day, they would paint the football white and play ball that way. Father was a water boy for that team. The Racine Cardinals became the Chicago Cardinals, became the Arizona Cardinals. It was an interesting situation. The story involves also how Mundelein came to Chicago. A very interesting thing, that Cardinal Mundelein was the youngest prelate in the church, about 42 years old, an auxiliary bishop in New York, and he was slated to go to Buffalo, New York. It was 1915. Well, Buffalo really simply could not accept him because he was a German American, and of course right near Buffalo was Canada, and Canada at war with Germany would not accept having their people go to church, would not accept a German American cardinal. So they switched. They sent Dennis Doherty to Buffalo for a short time before he went to Philadelphia, and they sent Mundelein to Chicago. And when Mundelein came to Chicago, they had a big civic welcome for him. And they had it at the University Club right around the corner here. Not around the corner, but around the corner on Michigan Avenue. And the University Club had a big civic dinner for him in 1915. And it so happened that a person got into the kitchen who was an anarchist, put on a chef's hat, and he poured enough strychnine into the soup to knock off everybody in the joint. And it was quite by accident that somebody passed by, tasted the soup, saw that it was bitter, and poured water in it, where, in fact, the soup was diluted, which gave everybody a severe case of dysentery, severe case of stomach illness. The soup was passed out to the group. Mundelein did not take the soup. And as a result, in the middle of the evening, everybody arose as one person and raced for the exits. Bishop Slattery tells me the story that there are only so many stalls. I don't want to be too graphic, but there are only so many stalls there. And somebody was banging on the stalls while the occupant said, "I'm in here." He said, "I'm a bishop, let me in." He said, "I don't care if you're a bishop or not, you're not getting in." The story includes his meeting with, he's a Sox fan, but it includes the meeting with Hack Wilson, hard drinking, power driving center fielder from 1926 to 1931, who during his career had 2,344 home runs, averaging .307, including 1,400 hits and about 1,063 runs batted in, who told Father, there were some times when I'd wake up in the morning and have to get the newspaper to find out how I did the day before. Absolutely incredible. More than any other team, it's the White Sox, including the year of the Black Sox, victimized by a grasping tightwad named Charles Comiskey, where Father's big brother Jim went to court to defend them. Jim Mcdermott was the oldest brother in the family, and he was, in fact, 6'3", and pictured as an incipient mayor of Chicago, incipient senator, incipient governor, whatever it is. He had all the qualities. He was an alderman, and then, of course, became a judge. At a certain time, he allied himself with a group of people who were opposite to Mayor Daley in the Democratic Party. At least at that time, Richard J. Daley was county clerk, seeking to be chairman of the Democratic Party of Cook County. And of course, as Chicago history shows, they had a meeting at which they felt that they would stall Daley so that Daley wouldn't become county chairman, and they would adjourn until after the 4th of July in 1953 to regroup, whereupon either Jim Mcdermott would become county chairman and resign his judgeship, or Clarence Wagner would, and Jim McDermott would be on the sort of a toboggan going up to become mayor of Chicago. During that time, of course, Clarence Wagner was killed in an automobile accident, and history turned, history changed, and Mayor Daley was made the chairman of the county, and in fact entered after that. The story continues about the lobbying attempts to make drunkenness in other words, to declassify the inebriate, to make decertify the inebriate so that he is not decriminalize the inebriate, so that in fact he and she are not regarded as being thrown in the pokey, but are in fact ill. And it was that lobbying effort led by Monsignor Mcdermott that did the job. There was a time after Jim Edgar became governor where he was slashing the social services in order to balance the budget, including the services that certainly Mcdermott and the Mcdermott Center were giving, that people went down to Springfield. And the senator who replaced John D'Arco gave Father Mcdermott the idea that he should go to Springfield and bring the mothers and children there. And they did. And on the floor of the Senate, when they were considering voting to override Mr. Edgar's veto, they passed out and handed to all the lawmakers children who, in fact, would be influenced by that action. And the bill and his veto was overridden. It's that kind of leadership that I think was given. It's the story, really, of a person who was active in so many ways that it's not just one priest. It's a story of an institution he co-founded. The story of Mcdermott Center at 932 West Washington, Mcdermott Annex at 933, Haymarket Maryville, on Montrose, Grand Boulevard, on South Martin Luther King Drive, the O'Hare Terminal Outreach, number 2, Haymarket West in Schaumburg, 30 programs and locations to provide a full round of care, including detoxification treatment, education, and case management. Haymarket serves more than 13,000 people yearly, 70% African American, 20% Caucasian, 7% Latino, 83% of those served have annual incomes of less than $7,400, 78% are unemployed, 90% receive public assistance, 68% have less education than a high school diploma. There is specialized treatment to pregnant and postpartum women, drug-impacted children, homeless men and women, individuals with HIV and AIDS, mentally ill substance abusers, and elderly. Haymarket is the largest addiction and treatment center for women in Illinois. It was the first residential treatment center for women in Illinois as well. It provides 12-step programs, case management services, individual counseling services. The book tells all these things and more. Well, what's more, take the case of Babe Ruth. As a youngster, Father went to see Babe Ruth play at Comiskey Park, and of course he took the streetcar, and he and his family were sitting in the bleachers when, in fact, Ruth came up, and the first time Ruth came up, he struck out. The second time he came up, he hit a pop fly and out. And then Father had to, somehow sipping lemonade, decided he was going to go to the restroom, and as he started to somehow step down through the bleachers, his brothers said, "You're crazy, Ruth is coming up." But nature called, he had to go down. He went down to the basement there. He was down on the ground floor. Suddenly there was a roar of the crowd. Ruth was up and he hit a home run, and there miraculously, falling through the bleachers was the ball rolling right at Father's feet. So he picked it up and he ran back, and his brother said, "You missed it, you missed it." He said, "I missed it, nothing, here's the ball." He held aloft his icon. That is one story, one of many that's in the book. But the best story, I think, of all is the story about a young man, a boy, by the name of Simon. It's my favorite story. Incidentally, on your tables is a brochure that tells about Haymarket. And this is in Father's own words. While an assistant at Our Lady of Peace, we would pay a weekly visit to La Radida Sanitarium, a health facility for children. There we found an 8-year-old child named Simon who was crying. He was waiting for his parents to take him to Cook County Hospital due to meningitis. One reason he didn't want to go was that he couldn't wear PJs. He couldn't wear PJs but a gown. Along with the toys on his bed was a catechism. We picked it up and asked him, "What does this book do? Does it teach you to fly a kite?" He looked with disgust and said, "No, it teaches me about God." We asked him, "Who is God? Why did God make you? Finally, can God do everything?" "No," he said. "What is it that God cannot do?" Simon responded emphatically, "God cannot tell a lie." That was worthy of Aristotle, says Father Mcdermott. Some weeks later, we visited the apartment of Simon's parents. There was a funeral wreath at the door, and inside there was Simon, attired in his first communion suit. He had changed his hospital gown for the PJs of eternal life. What more need be said? Give a hand to Monsignor Ignatius Mcdermott. I think I'm going to call on Father to tell us what Harry Houdini did at that time at Mundelein. And Father, the podium is right over there, where you don't have to scale the wall here. And I think I'd like to have you reminisce about not only Harry Houdini, but maybe John Ireland Gallery and some of the other people whom you met at a time when you were a young priest. And tell us first about Harry Houdini. Father Mcdermott.
Well, while steaming through Quigley's sophomore year, Harry Houdini came to visit the place. He knew one of the professors, and he did some great tricks one after another, and I had the privilege of waiting in the hallway as he came out. And I said to him, "How about going to 35th and Shields and help the White Sox? Have a miracle on 35th Street and bring them to the World Series." I also recall my days at Comiskey Park, and also the days at Comiskey Park and at 61st and Racine, where I was a water boy for the Chicago Cardinals. They were called the Racine Cardinals in those days, and they were founded by a painter by the name of Chris O'Brien and his brother Pat O'Brien. And the teams in those days, professional teams, they were about 2 feet ahead of the sheriff, because the Chicago Cardinals used to practice in the shadow of the library in Sherman Park, because there were lamp posts there. And Chris O'Brien, being a painter, a house painter, was the Tom Edison of his day. And I recall being interviewed years ago, and I told this sports writer from the Sports Illustrated about the story of the ghost ball. Chris O'Brien, being a painter, and the fellows in those days, they all had jobs, and after their work, they would repair to Sherman Park to play, and dusk would set in, and Chris O'Brien painted the ball white, and he was the author of the ghost ball. But I remember reading the life of Babe Ruth, an immortal character, and Babe was a product of an orphanage in St. Mary's Orphanage in Baltimore, Maryland. In the height of his halcyon days, He was in Washington playing the Senators, who were much alive then as a baseball team. And he went to Baltimore to visit the orphanage where he was reared. One of the persons on the reception committee was a brother who was very close to Babe Ruth. He escorted Babe to the door after Babe's visit, and Babe said, "Brother, can I do anything for you?" And the brother reached into his religious garb, extracted a baseball, presented it to Babe Ruth, and he says, "Babe, I would love to have your autograph." Babe Ruth, with tears streaming down his face, said, "Brother, I should be seeking your autograph. While I was a kid in this orphanage working in a tailor shop, you were not only teaching us how to sew buttons in a shirt, but to sow virtues into our soul. You were also teaching us, while we were working in that shop, that souls were better than bodies." So Babe took that ball and very reluctantly signed his autograph and presented it to the brother. So while we're up here speaking to all of you with this privilege today, you are the people who are writing your hearts, not on leather, but on humanity's soul. And we thank you very much for being aboard. And if we're always looking for examples in our life, all we have to do is look at all the persons in this room. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One of the innovative things that Father did is to pioneer the fact that women who were pregnant and who were about ready to deliver, medical science regarded it inevitable that those children would be afflicted with alcoholism and drug addiction. An experiment was made at Haymarket where Father maintained, against a preponderance of evidence, I guess, from the standpoint of the medical community, that if a young lady was treated and had nourishment and received her addiction treated promptly, that child need not be born with addiction. There were many people who felt that it wouldn't work. It worked. And so the first child, I think, died stillborn. After that, it was a significant revolution in the treatment of people who are afflicted with addiction. I want to tell you that I am very pleased to serve on the board of Haymarket, and it has been a personal inspiration to me. I have dinner with him every Monday night and lunch with him every Saturday, and the stories flow and flow. Thank you very much. I appreciate your being here. Back now to the President, Jay Doherty, and your questions, if you have.
If anyone has any questions for Tom, why don't you just go to that microphone there and just state your name and ask him a question.
Well, let me tell you that this book, all the proceeds go to Haymarket, so don't feel that you're rewarding me particularly. But I've had my reward. So if you have any comments or suggestions about it, Ray Sochek, do you have any comments about it? Ray Sochek is the CEO of Haymarket and was my editor. Go over to the microphone.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Father. I've had the privilege of working with Father for 27 years, initially at Catholic Charities and then eventually at Haymarket Center. when Tom was writing the book, he would sit with us and we'd tell these stories, and Father would continue to add to the book. And Tom asked me when he was finally finished to help him edit the book and see if the stories were accurate. And he would admonish me, saying, "Remember, every word I wrote as a child, and it's so handle it carefully." So as I was editing it, I would gently say, "Tom, this isn't exactly the right way that this happened." But what the book really is about is it's about providence. It is about a man who has a great belief in the power of God, who has shared that belief and has surrounded himself with people who believe in power that is greater than ourselves, and that is power of God intervening to do things that were miracles, things that were ordinary happenings that should never have happened. He is a leader. Monsignor McDermott is our leader, and he is a leader that probably in a normal priest's life should have been retired a number of years ago and living in the west coast of California somewhere and enjoying retirement. Instead, he retired from Catholic Charities and picked up a whole new career. And as you can see and hear, he is still going full steam. When he was conceiving the idea of Haymarket, a social setting detox program, the idea was scorned upon by the people that he presented it to. And so he had to go out and find his own funding. And with some reluctance and a limited amount of funding, he founded the first Haymarket Center, then called Haymarket House. And we began to build, and Father got kicked out of one building at 12 South Peoria, and then got kicked out because they were renovating the property, tearing down the buildings, selling the buildings off. And he and some very significant board members, namely Mr. Jack Whalen, who's our co-chairman, were looking for a building. And the building that they had occupied was 35,000 square feet. And they were kind of looking for that exact same building, size-wise. And so they searched the area, and finally Mr. Whalen said to Father, he said, "Father, where do you want to be?" And Father said, "I want to be where I am." And so they found that they were looking in an area close to 14 North Sangamon, which is where the building was that Haymarket was then currently occupying. They found the building. It was 150,000 square feet with no windows in it, no stairwells, and just broken down. And Father calls it the greatest act of faith he's ever done when he put his signature on a contract for $1,050,000. And I think he had something like $36,000 in the bank to pay for the building. And he and Mr. Whalen and people like Mr. Roeser and other board members got together, and they put on a campaign. And again, it goes back to the idea of providence. Things happen the way they were supposed to be. Today, that 150,000 square foot building is completely filled with programs, and we need every inch of space that we could have. It's been a program that Mr. Roeser alluded to that has helped many people. The pregnant women, to date we've had over 900 babies that have been born drug-free as a result of the Pregnant Women's Program. And as Mr. Roeser indicated, the research indicated that after 5.5 months, if a woman was still on drugs, that she would deliver a drug-affected baby. And when we began to deliver babies that were healthy, above average in weight, getting proper medical care, proper nutritional care, and the mother was abstinent in terms of alcohol and drug use, the baby was born healthy and drug-free, and it reversed the research. So the book is filled with all kinds of things like that, stories, and it's always goes back to the idea of the glorification of God's work in the life of Monsignor McDermott, because Father basically says the Lord is writing the script, and we just really believe that if it's supposed to happen, it's supposed to happen. We've had hard times, and as other social service agencies have had hard times, but we've survived. We'll continue to survive, and we've grown, and the need has grown. and we will continue to meet the need. The thing about the book is that it has been published by the Mcdermott Foundation. We did not have a publisher, so people, can't go to Borders to get it, and they can't go to the other bookstores to get the book. We're trying to get it into bookstores. If anybody can help us with that, we deeply appreciate it. We are doing these kinds of things to let people know that the book is being sold, but right now the only place right now to access the book is through the Mcdermott Center, and the information is on the table how to contact the Mcdermott Center. We are looking to put it on Amazon.com pretty soon, but this book is not currently available through the bookstores, and we're looking for ways and means to have that happen. So,
And the book is for sale outside.
and the book is for sale outside, right. We have a couple of our staff that are selling the book outside, and it's at a price of $24.95. I think that's
right.
the price today. So please help yourself, tell your friends, and it's a privilege to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One thing I'll say before I relinquish it to President J. Doherty is that Father is very much a rebel, as a number of people at Haymarket are. He was a loyal administrator at Catholic Charities, but Catholic Charities, as all bureaucracies, felt that probably an entrepreneur was somebody who was to be feared. And so his struggle was frequently with the bureaucrats at Catholic Charities as well, and he was always regarded as a rebel. The interesting thing about the cardinal archbishops that he dealt with, he has very warm feelings about John Cardinal Cody, who was really the victim of a lot of bad press when he was here. But it was Cardinal Cody who gave Father the ministry to priests who were afflicted with alcohol dependency and drug dependency. Incidentally, if you go into Holy Name Cathedral, you'll see on the ceiling the red hats of all the cardinals that Chicago has had, hanging there at the very top of the dome of the cathedral when you go in there. There is a rumor that when the soul of an archbishop leaves purgatory, the red hat will fall. So far, all red hats are there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Tom, I think you should suggest they have a Galero up there for Monsignor McDermott. Yeah. Take care, everyone. Join the City Club, and someday I'll mention your name. Meeting adjourned. Thanks.